joining us right now. Does a tremendous job covering the NFL for The Athletic, Mr. Zack Rosenblatt on the Comcast Business Hotline. How are you today, Zach?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for coming on. Obviously, you covered the Jets. You've been around the team. You've been around the NFL. And when the Eagles have a roster like they have, finding a guy for less money who can really contribute when you're so top-heavy is so important. And a big surprise for us, if we're being honest, going back to training camp, is Makai Becton. You wrote a story about that. And just what made you want to write this about Becton? Because he's kind of the unsung hero of the offensive line for the best offensive line in football this year.
Yeah, a big reason is I know the backstory with Makai Becton. I know everything that happened in New York, how it ended, all the injuries he dealt with, all the turmoil, all the, the conflict he had with the coaching staff there and stuff like that. And so I think he was always somebody that you looked at as he's huge. He has crazy athleticism for a guy his size. And if anybody could unlock him, I think he had a lot of talent. He just was never able to find that balance of like a coaching staff that he believed in, that believed in him. And then, he goes to the Eagles, and as soon as he signs them, I'm like, all right, well, Jeff Stoutland's getting his hand on him. I bet you we're going to be talking about him when the playoffs come around, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, it didn't play out like I thought. Like, if you had told me he was going to play right guard, I would never have believed that, but that's exactly what happened because Stoutland obviously has that effect on guys.
And that was a problem he had up in New York, is that he hurt his knee, correct? And they wanted him to play right guard, and he told them he couldn't?
Yeah, so he hurt his knee a couple times. He had some injury issues, but at one point they were trying to move him. They were going to move him to right tackle, and he sent out a tweet saying, "I am a left tackle" in all capital letters, and he made it clear he was only a left tackle. And so I think he needed to get humbled a little bit. I would say, I think the way things played out in New York and him not getting a lot of interest in free agency, I think that kind of opened his eyes a little bit, and so he went to the Eagles with an open mind, and then when they approached him about playing guard, he was willing to do it. I don't know that he would have been willing to do that in New York, and so I think that showed some maturity with him and some growth.
Looking at the league like that, and you talk about a team like the Jets, and then you look at the Eagles, and you said as soon as before he even saw, even played a game, Stoutland, he'll find a way to unlock it. How important in your experience, and obviously the Chiefs and the Eagles are two of the best organizations in the world right now, is it important for these young guys, with the draft and all that, to go to the right situation to get the best out of them?
Yeah, I think it's 100% about situation, especially with guys like that who aren't maybe, not to say he's not intrinsically motivated, but his motivation is a little bit different than guys, he's had some troubles with, his weight and staying in shape and things like that. So I think he needed a coach that was going to show him love and nurture him and really build him up, as opposed to, some coaches, they are the type that are really hard on them and really drill sergeants and things like that. And there are some coaches who aren't willing to change their coaching from player to player. I think the best coaches are the ones that do not coach every single player the same way. And Jeff Stoutland is somebody that famously coaches each guy the way he needs to be coached. And so that's why I thought, if anybody was going to pull out the talent that was inside of Makai Becton's body, it was going to be him.
And I find it very interesting because Jordan Mailata said in your article, I'm super proud of him. I feel like I've known him forever. He's come in. He's been a pivotal piece to our offensive line. He has the right mindset every day to attack, to learn, and that's been a big part of his game this year. Wasn't that what the biggest problem with the Jets was?
Yeah, I just think it was a case of he didn't really believe the coaches had his best interest at heart, and I think that he didn't really feel loved and respected there, and I think that led to him maybe lashing out a little bit in some ways and kind of pushing back on the things they wanted and things they did, I think some of their coaches would, go into press conferences and talk about his struggles with his weight and things like that. And so it just ultimately was not a marriage. The coaching staff that was there when he was drafted was different than the one that he wound up spending most of his time there with. And he's never connected with them. And he's a guy that just needs to connect with his coaching staff. So I think the most fascinating thing about him going forward is if he leaves the Eagles, is he going to go to an organization that, suits him, or is he going to go somewhere that pays him the most money? He's going to be a free agent this offseason.
Yes, he is. We're speaking with Zack Rosenblatt. Does a tremendous job covering the Jets and the NFL for The Athletic. I want to ask you about him as a person when you versus now. The one we've seen has been nothing but cooperative. He's been so happy to win. He was actually, because, the Eagles have been good this is now their fourth straight year in the playoffs. For some of these guys, it's old news. He was very emotional, crying on the sideline when they won a division for the first time, crying on the sideline when they made the Super Bowl. It seems like from your story, he was a very different person when he was with the Jets as well.
Yeah, he was. And I think an important part of this. I think a lot of times it's easy to just make fun of the Jets when a guy leaves them and plays well because it happens so often. And so I think there's a part of that comes out of this conversation. But I think both sides could have done a lot of things differently. I think Makai, he was young and he was a little immature when he was at the Jets, and I don't think he handled a lot of those situations in the best way. I think he learned a lot from that, and I hope he takes all of that going forward. But it's funny you say that because I asked Nolan Smith about Makai Becton, the coach in the story. His answer was fascinating to me because he's like seeing Makai cry the way he did. It made him realize how they shouldn't take the success the Eagles have for granted, because you look at the Eagles, they've been to the playoffs 8 times in the last 14 years, and in that stretch the Jets have not made the playoffs, the longest drought in all 4 sports. And so Makai Becton is emotional because he's never even come close to making the playoffs, and he was in a situation where he wasn't happy, and now he's somewhere where he feels loved and supported and respected.
Do you feel as though, obviously it got worse than just the coaches. He was getting into it with the fans a lot up in New York. Did everything just come to a head, and once that ended, he felt like a weight was lifted off of his shoulder?
Yeah, I do think there's a big part of that. And like I said earlier, I do think there's something to be said about him hitting free agency and not necessarily getting the interest that he wanted, but Jeff Stoutland wanting him. I think that really did play a lot into it. I think that, when he was in New York, the weight thing, that came up a lot, and fans were pretty harsh with him. There was a stretch where, he when he hurt his knee in 2021 during the season and missed the whole season, fans were constantly in his mentions calling him fat and all the kind of mean, adjectives you can come up with. And he showed up to a press conference the following off season wearing a shirt that, said big bust, and it said all the adjectives that all the fans had been tweeting at him. And he's like, I'm going to make all of them eat their words. And, then that season he got hurt again, unfortunately, so he wasn't able to, live up to that yet. But now he is. Now he's getting to go back, and you see him on Twitter. He barks back at Jets fans all the time, and he's enjoying himself. And it is cool to see for a kid who's been through a lot.
Zach, switching over to just the game, we want to get your perspective because you're not with the Eagles all the time and you're not with the Chiefs all the time, which brings us a different perspective. Just looking at the teams on paper before we look at any intangibles, which team do you think has the better roster?
Yeah, I think the Eagles pretty clearly have the better roster if you just go position by position. I think you have the player who's playing the best out of any player in the NFL over the course of the playoffs, and that's Saquon Barkley, and that defense is playing at an unreal level right now. So in terms of pure talent, there's no question to me the Jets are better. And what it ultimately comes down to, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this too, the Chiefs are always going to have the head coach and quarterback advantage, and usually that's often what all it takes to win a game like this. But I do think the Eagles have a little something special this year, and so I think it's going to be a pretty phenomenal game, and I think the Eagles have it in them to win it.
I was just going to say, do you feel like out of all the years that have been going on with the Chiefs, is this the one that feels like they are ripe for the taking?
It does, and even more than just the Chiefs side of things, it just feels like it's the Eagles' year again, kind of like in 2017. And this team, I think, is more talented than a 2017 team. And they're just they're firing on all cylinders right now, and they all love each other, and the vibes are just great. I've been at all their press conferences, been at all the media availabilities. This team just really, really loves each other, and they got all the right people in that building. I think Howie did a phenomenal job building that roster. So, I think they absolutely can win this game.
And before we let you go, Zach, you're down in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, I am.
Now, we're very jealous, but that's a whole separate thing. Are you going to be able to get out and have a little – I know you're there for professional work. Are you going to be able to have a little bit of fun out while you're down there this week?
Oh man, it's impossible not to have fun when you're out in New Orleans. But yeah, I'll be enjoying myself for sure.
Absolutely.
Good.
Listen, we really appreciate you spending some time with us. Great story, everybody. We've been telling everybody they should read your story about Makai Becton that's in the Athletic right now. Appreciate it, man, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, great talking to you guys.
Thanks so much. All right, that was Zack Rosenblatt.
We got some truth from one of them there at the end.
Everybody else has been like, no,
I'm going straight to bed, 9 o'clock.
That's why I've been asking everybody, who was going to keep it real at some point? Got to do something in New Orleans. Got to do something. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want more of this content, make sure you like and subscribe. And you can do that kind of over here if you want more of the best show ever.